Grand Strategos Forelag gazed through the observation viewport of the Cthar, soaring vessel Indomitable Claw, his scaled hands clasped firmly behind his back. The swirling gases of a Lyra 7 nebula created a mesmerizing tapestry of purples and blues, punctuated by the occasional glint of light, reflecting off mineral-rich asteroids. So much wealth, so much potential, and by historical right, all of it belonged to the Cthar Confederacy. A truly magnificent sight, is it not, Sub-Commander? Forelag remarked, not bothering to turn to the younger officer who stood at attention several paces behind him. Indeed, Grand Strategos, replied Sub-Commander Kalen, her posture perfect, voice steady. The ancients chose wisely when they planted our markers here. Forelag's mouth curled into what humans might mistake for a smile, though it was merely a display of satisfaction. Planted markers that these humans conveniently ignore. They arrive with their mining drones and outposts, claiming virgin territory, when our claim predates their very emergence from their homeworld. The Cthar Confederacy had ruled this sector of the galaxy for millennia, a coalition of reptilian species united under the principles of strength, honor, and military discipline. They had weathered the rise and fall of many would-be galactic powers, always emerging as the stabilizing force in their region. And now, these humans, these soft, warm-blooded newcomers, dare to challenge their territorial claims. The human ambassador requests another meeting, Grand Strategos, Kalen said, breaking the momentary silence. She claims to have a new proposal regarding resource distribution. Forelag's tail swished in irritation, the only break in his otherwise stoic demeanor. More words. Always more words with these humans. They speak of compromise when they should be preparing for surrender. He turned fully now, his impressive height forcing Kalen to look up to meet his gaze. Tell me, Sub-Commander, what is your assessment of these humans? You've studied their conflicts more than most. Kalen hesitated, choosing her words carefully. They are paradoxical, sir. They expand rapidly, prioritize diplomacy and trade over military conquest, yet when provoked. She paused. Historical data suggests they can be unpredictable and surprisingly effective in warfare. Forelag dismissed this with a sharp gesture. They have been fortunate in their conflicts, facing disorganized or technologically inferior opponents. Against a disciplined force like ours, he made a dismissive clicking sound with his jaw. Their diplomatic posturing merely masks their reluctance to face true warriors. The communication panel at Kalen's wrist chimed softly. The neutral station confirms the human delegation has arrived, sir. Very well. Forelag straightened his ceremonial armor, adorned with the markers of countless successful campaigns. Let us hear what new concessions Ambassador Sharma brings to the table today. Perhaps they finally recognize the futility of their position. As the shuttle transported them to the neutral station positioned at the edge of the Lyra 7 nebula, Forelag reflected on the 3 weeks of fruitless negotiations. The human ambassador, Anya Sharma, was undeniably skilled, patient, intelligent, and frustratingly composed. She never raised her voice, never showed anger at the Cthar's increasingly firm stance. Instead, she continuously presented revised proposals for shared resource rights, adjusted boundary lines, and mutual development agreements. It was, in Forelag's estimation, the desperate flailing of a weaker power trying to maintain dignity while being forced into retreat. The humans had to know that their small flotilla of United Earth Defense Force vessels stationed near the nebula were no match for the Cthar Vanguard fleet. Yet still they persisted with these talks, prolonging the inevitable. The neutral station, a relic from a long-extinct species that had once attempted to mediate between the galactic powers, provided an appropriately sterile environment for the continued diplomatic charade. The central conference room featured a circular table with exactly matching seats, walls of a dull, non-reflective material, and atmospheric controls that maintained conditions barely tolerable for both species. Ambassador Sharma was already seated when Forelag and his small entourage entered. She rose, a courtesy the Cthar neither expected nor particularly appreciated, and offered the formal greeting gesture they had established during their first meeting. Grand Strategos Forlag, Subcommander Kalen, esteemed representatives of the Cathar Confederacy, thank you for meeting with us again, Sharma said, her voice clear and measured. She was flanked by 2 aides and a UEDF officer wearing the subdued insignia of a tactical advisor. Forlag took his seat without returning the greeting. Let us dispense with pleasantries, Ambassador. I understand. You have yet another proposal. I warn you, my government's patience wears thin. If Sharma was offended by his brusqueness, she showed no sign. Indeed, Grand Strategos, after careful consideration of your concerns regarding historical claim, we've developed an approach that we believe honors the Cathar Confederacy's long-standing presence in this region, while allowing for Terran alliance development of certain resources. She activated the holographic display embedded in the table center. A three-dimensional map of the Lyra 7 Nebula appeared, with color-coded zones highlighting different regions. We propose a division based on resource type rather than strict territorial boundaries, Sharma continued. Cathar operations would have exclusive rights to the mineral-rich asteroid belts in these sectors. Several regions flashed in green, while Terran mining would focus on the gaseous elements in these outer regions. Different areas illuminated in blue. Forlag leaned forward, analyzing the display with narrowed eyes. The proposal did, in fact, allocate nearly 60% of the most valuable resources to Cathar control. It was, objectively speaking, more generous than previous offers. And what of the central region? He asked, indicating an area left unmarked in the projection. The zone containing the highest concentration of warp-stabilizing crystals? A jointly administered zone, Sharma replied smoothly, with equal extraction rights and a mutual defense pact to ensure security. Forlag sat back, his scales shifting slightly as he contained his irritation. Even now, they sought to maintain a foothold in the most valuable part of the nebula. He exchanged a glance with Kalen, who maintained a neutral expression but whose subtle eye movement conveyed her assessment. The offer was better than expected. You present this as if it were a generous concession, Forlag said finally, when in reality, you are simply accepting the inevitable with better grace than I anticipated. The Cathar Confederacy's claim to Lyra 7 predates your species' first interstellar voyage. That you would presume to allow us access to what is rightfully ours demonstrates the arrogance that has become the hallmark of human expansion. Sharma's expression remained unchanged, though the UEDF officer at her side shifted almost imperceptibly. Grand Strategos, with respect, historical claims must be balanced against practical realities. The Terran Alliance has established functional outposts and infrastructure throughout the nebula over the past 5 years. Our proposal acknowledges both your historical presence and our current investments. Investments made without consultation or permission, Forlag countered. Imagine, Ambassador, if I were to construct a military base on your homeworld's moon, then propose we share its strategic advantage. An imperfect analogy, Sharma responded with the faintest smile. Earth's moon has been continuously inhabited by humans for over a century. The Lyra 7 Nebula, by contrast, shows evidence of neither continuous Cathar presence nor development until very recently, coinciding with our own arrival. Forlag's tail twitched involuntarily, a sign of agitation that did not go unnoticed by the human delegation. You question the validity of our historical markers. Not at all, Sharma said quickly. We acknowledge the artifacts discovered in the region may indeed be of Cathar origin. Our archaeologists find them fascinating. However, artifact placement does not constitute continuous habitation or development under standard interstellar law. Cathar law recognizes no such distinction, Forlag said coldly. The Confederacy Council has been clear on this matter. Lyra 7 lies within our ancestral boundaries. Your presence is an encroachment we have tolerated longer than many counseled. The negotiations continued in this circular fashion for another 3 hours. Sharma presented alternative arrangements, suggested phased implementation plans, and proposed joint scientific missions. Forlag rejected each in turn, his patience visibly thinning as the meeting progressed. Finally, as station's chronometers indicated they had reached the scheduled end of the session, Sharma gathered her materials with practiced efficiency. "Grand Strategos, I appreciate your time today," she said. "While we haven't reached agreement, I believe we've clarified each side's position. I propose we reconvene in 3 days, allowing both delegations time to consult with their respective governments." Forlag rose to his full height, towering over the human delegation. 3 days will not change the fundamental reality, Ambassador. Lyra, 7 belongs to the Cathar Confederacy. Your government would be wise to accept this and redirect your mining operations to less contested regions. Sharma met his gaze steadily. "With respect, Grand Strategos, the Terran Alliance has already invested substantially in Lyra 7. We have 17 automated extraction facilities and 3 research stations operating in the nebula. We cannot simply abandon them." "Then you place your machinery above peace," Forlag said dismissively. "A curious priority." As the human delegation departed, Kalen approached Forlag. "They show no signs of yielding, Grand Strategos." "Of course not," Forlag replied, watching the humans disappear down the corridor. "They believe their words will eventually wear us down. It is their way, to exhaust opponents through endless talk until resistance seems more troublesome than concession." He turned to his subordinate. "Contact High Command. I believe it is time we demonstrated the difference between Cathar resolve and human obstinacy." The Council's approval came faster than even Forlag had anticipated. Perhaps they too had grown weary of the humans' delaying tactics. Within 24 hours, the Cathar Vanguard fleet had mobilized 15 warships, including the flagship Indomitable Claw, arranged in attack formation at the edge of the Lyra 7 Nebula. The human presence remained unchanged, for UEDF patrol vessels maintaining their positions at a respectful distance, neither advancing nor retreating as the Cathar forces assembled. Their apparent calm in the face of such overwhelming force puzzled some of Forlag's junior officers. But the Grand Strategos saw only the expected hesitation of a weaker power buying time for further diplomatic maneuvers. "Establish a no-fly zone throughout the nebula," Forlag commanded from the bridge of the Indomitable Claw. "Any unidentified vessel entering or exiting is to be intercepted. Prepare strike teams to neutralize the human mining operations." "Neutralize, sir?" Kalen questioned carefully. "Disable their equipment, Subcommander, not their personnel," Forlag clarified. "We're making a point, not starting a war. The humans value their machinery and investments. Losing them will force them to reconsider their position more effectively than any further discussion." The operation proceeded with characteristic Cathar efficiency. Strike teams deployed to 3 of the largest human mining outposts, systematically disabling extraction equipment, communications arrays, and propulsion systems. As instructed, they avoided direct confrontation with a handful of human technicians present, merely securing them in designated safe areas while the work was carried out. Within 6 hours, nearly half of the human operations in Lyra 7 had been rendered inoperable. The UEDF vessels maintained their positions, neither intervening nor withdrawing. Their restraint was concerning to Kalen, who brought her observations to Forlag in the Strategic Command Center. "Grand Strategos, the human military response seems inadequate," she said, displaying the tactical readouts. "They've made no attempt to prevent our operations, despite having clear sensor readings of our activities." Forlag studied the display, a satisfied expression crossing his features. "They recognize the futility of resistance, Subcommander. Their patrol vessels are scouts, not warships. They will be destroyed in any direct engagement." "Even so, sir, historical records indicate humans typically respond more vigorously to such challenges. In the Proxima incident, The Proxima incident involved direct casualties," Forlag interrupted. "We have been careful to avoid harming their personnel. They likely hope to salvage the situation diplomatically." He deactivated the display with a dismissive gesture. which is precisely why we must present them with a fait accompli. By the time Ambassador Sharma prepares her next presentation, there will be nothing left to negotiate. The communication officer's voice interrupted them. Grand Strategos, incoming transmission from the Terran vessel Vigilant. Ambassador Sharma requests an immediate conference. Forlag exchanged a look with Kalen. Sooner than expected. Put her through. The main view screen activated, revealing Ambassador Sharma. Unlike their previous encounters, she appeared now in a formal Terran Alliance uniform rather than diplomatic attire. Her expression was composed but grave. Grand Strategos Forlag, she began without preamble. The Terran Alliance condemns in the strongest possible terms the Cathar Confederacy's unprovoked military action against our lawful operations in the Lyra 7 Nebula. This constitutes a clear violation of interstellar law and the diplomatic protocols both our governments have observed until now. Forlag stepped forward, positioning himself centrally before the view screen. Ambassador, the Cathar Confederacy is simply enforcing its sovereign territory against unauthorized incursions. Your mining operations were established without our consent in space that has belonged to us since before your species achieved spaceflight. That interpretation is not supported by galactic convention or precedent, Sharma countered, her voice level despite the tension evident in her posture. Nevertheless, I am authorized to present one final proposal to resolve this situation peacefully. Your previous proposals have all failed to acknowledge the fundamental reality, Forlag said dismissively. But speak if you must. Sharma's expression remained unchanged as she activated a data transmission. We propose an immediate cessation of hostile actions by Cathar forces, followed by a phased withdrawal to pre-conflict positions. In exchange, the Terran Alliance will reduce our extraction operations by 30% and acknowledge Cathar historical connection to the region through formal recognition and naming rights for all celestial bodies within the nebula. Forlag barely glanced at the transmitted data before letting out a sharp, derisive laugh. Ambassador, you misunderstand your position entirely. The Cathar Vanguard fleet now controls Lyra 7 completely. Your mining operations are being systematically disabled. Your patrol vessels make no move to intervene because they cannot, not without facing destruction. He leaned closer to the view screen, his voice dropping to a more menacing register. Here is the Cathar Confederacy's final position. All Terran vessels and personnel will withdraw from the Lyra 7 Nebula within 24 hours. Any equipment or facilities left behind will be considered abandoned property. Any vessels remaining after this deadline will be treated as hostile intruders and dealt with accordingly. Sharma's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes, a subtle shift that Forlag couldn't quite interpret, gave him a momentary pause. I urge you to reconsider, Grand Strategos, she said quietly. This course of action will have consequences beyond what you anticipate. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Forlag's crest rose slightly in amusement. Your government has demonstrated nothing but reluctance to engage in even the most justified conflict. The Cathar Confederacy will not be deterred by diplomatic posturing. He straightened to his full height. 24 hours, Ambassador. This is our clemency. Accept it. Sharma regarded him silently for a long moment, then nodded once, sharply. I will convey your position to my government, Grand Strategos. Expect our response shortly. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the indomitable claw in momentary silence. They will withdraw, Forlag declared confidently to his officers. Prepare to secure the abandoned facilities and establish permanent Cathar presence throughout the nebula. Less than an hour later, as Forlag was reviewing plans for resource exploitation of the newly secured territory, the communication officer announced another incoming transmission. The humans respond quickly, Forlag remarked. Ambassador Sharma no doubt wishes to negotiate the terms of their withdrawal. But when the view screen activated, it was not Ambassador Sharma who appeared. Instead, a stern-faced human in the full combat uniform of the UEDF filled the screen. The insignia identified him as Admiral Marcus Thorne of the 7th Expeditionary Fleet. Forlag frowned at this unexpected development. I was expecting Ambassador Sharma. Grand Strategos Forlag, the human said, his voice calm and measured, devoid of any apparent emotion. We have received your final response to Ambassador Sharma's proposal and your demand for unconditional withdrawal. On behalf of the UEDF High Command and the Terran Alliance government, I am authorized to inform you that we're done talking. The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the view screen blank. Forlag stared for a moment, then let out a barking laugh. Is this their final theatrical gesture? Replacing their diplomat with a soldier to deliver an ominous one-liner. He turned to his tactical officer. Status of the human vessels? No change, Grand Strategos. Their patrol ships maintain position outside the nebula perimeter. As expected, Forlag's words died in his throat as alarms suddenly blared throughout the indomitable claw. The tactical displays flickered, then showed impossible readings, hundreds of anomalies appearing simultaneously throughout the nebula and surrounding space. What is happening? He demanded, moving swiftly to the central command console. The tactical officer's hands moved frantically over the controls. Multiple system failures across the fleet, sir. Communications grid is experiencing massive interference. Sensor arrays reporting contradictory data. The officer paused, eyes widening. Sir, we're detecting FDL signatures. Hundreds of them. Impossible, Forlag hissed. Our intelligence confirmed the humans had no significant forces within response range. The nearest fleet was. A violent shudder ran through the ship, cutting him off mid-sentence. Emergency lighting activated as several primary systems went offline simultaneously. Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer, voice rising with barely controlled panic. Engineering reports multiple explosive decompressions near the primary power relays. Sabotage, Kalen whispered, horror dawning on her face. They must have infiltrated our vessels before the operation began. Before Forlag could respond, the tactical officer called out again, his voice cracking with disbelief. Sir, FDL transition's complete. It's the UEDF 7th Expeditionary Fleet. At least 200 vessels, capital ships, and support craft, in perfect attack formation. They're completely surrounding our position. The main view screen flickered back to life, now showing a real-time tactical display of what was unfolding around them. The neat formation of Cathar warships that had constituted the Vanguard fleet now appeared as disorganized points of light, surrounded by an overwhelming force of human vessels that had seemingly materialized from nowhere. Forlag stared in numb disbelief. The 7th Expeditionary Fleet was supposed to be patrolling the Arcturus sector, weeks away at maximum FTL. Either human FTL technology was far more advanced than intelligence had indicated, or this had been planned long in advance. The diplomatic negotiations nothing but a carefully orchestrated charade while they positioned their forces. Grand Strategos, incoming fire. The tactical officer's warning came too late. The first wave of human attacks was surgical in its precision. Instead of the expected barrage against shields and hull, concentrated energy beams and kinetic penetrators struck exactly where the Cathar vessels were most vulnerable. Points that should have been known only to Cathar engineers, where power distribution nodes and engine control systems were located. 3 Cathar warships were completely disabled in the opening salvo, their engines dead, weapons systems offline. The remaining vessels attempted to return fire, but found their targeting systems compromised by what appeared to be a massively coordinated electronic warfare assault. Defensive pattern Theta 9. Forlag ordered, fighting to regain control of the rapidly deteriorating situation. All vessels concentrate fire on Sector 4. Break through their formation. But his commands went unheeded or unheard. The communication systems across the fleet had been compromised, with vessels receiving garbled instructions or nothing at all. The few ships that managed to coordinate attempted to punch through the human blockade, only to face precisely targeted weapons fire that disabled their propulsion systems with terrifying accuracy. On the bridge of the indomitable claw, chaos reigned. System after system failed or reported nonsensical data. The weapons officer couldn't establish targeting locks. The navigation console displayed phantom obstacles and impossible spatial configurations. How are they doing this? Forlag demanded of no one in particular, watching as another Cthar vessel went dark on the tactical display. How did they penetrate our systems so completely? Kaelin, struggling to coordinate what remained of their defensive capabilities, looked up from her console with dawning comprehension. The negotiations, she said. All those weeks of talks, proposals, counterproposals, they were mapping our communications protocols, identifying vulnerabilities in our network architecture. Impossible, Forlag insisted, though with less conviction than before. Our cybersecurity is impenetrable. Evidently not, Kaelin replied grimly, as another series of impacts rocked the flagship. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for less than 30 minutes. It wasn't a fight so much as a methodical dismantling of the Cthar Vanguard fleet. UEDF electronic warfare squadrons continued to overwhelm remaining Cthar defenses, while stealthy destroyer units targeted critical systems with surgical precision. The larger human cruisers and battleships formed an impenetrable perimeter, systematically neutralizing any Cthar vessel that attempted to flee or mount significant resistance. Most disturbing of all to Forlag was the silence. Throughout the one-sided slaughter, not once did the humans transmit demands for surrender or ceasefire. There were no ultimatums, no opportunities given for the Cthar to salvage their dignity. The human fleet operated with cold, mechanical efficiency, as if exterminating vermin rather than engaging with a worthy opponent. On the bridge of the indomitable claw, now illuminated only by emergency lighting and the glow of the few functioning consoles, Forlag slumped into his command chair. The tactical display showed the devastating truth. Of the 15 warships that had comprised the Cthar Vanguard fleet, 11 were completely disabled or destroyed. 3 had managed to escape to the nebula's edge, where they were being pursued by human interceptors. Only the indomitable claw itself remained semi-functional, its primary systems. Crippled, but life support and minimal maneuvering capability still online. Grand Strategos, Kaelin approached, her uniform torn and stained with the dark ichor that served as Cthar blood. A wound on her crest had been hastily sealed. Engineering reports the main reactor will fail completely within the hour. We must abandon ship. Forlag barely acknowledged her, his eyes fixed on the view screen, which now showed the massive human flagship slowly approaching their position. Its hull bore no battle damage, its formation perfect, as if it were conducting a routine patrol rather than concluding a decisive victory. They knew, he said finally, his voice hollow. They knew everything. Our capabilities, our protocols, our weaknesses. He turned to Kaelin, seeing in her eyes the same devastating realization. This wasn't a diplomatic failure. It was a military intelligence catastrophe. Kaelin nodded grimly. The humans never intended to share Lyra 7. They merely needed time to position their fleet and infiltrate our systems. No, Forlag corrected her, a bitter understanding crystallizing in his mind. They would have accepted a shared arrangement. Ambassador Sharma's proposals were genuine. It was our intransigence that forced their hand. He let out a harsh, self-deprecating laugh. We mistook their patience for weakness, their willingness to negotiate for fear. And in doing so, we compelled them to show us their true nature. The evacuation was conducted in eerie silence. The human fleet made no move to prevent the Cthar escape pods and shuttles from departing the crippled vessels, nor did they attempt to capture Forlag or other high-ranking officers. They simply maintained their positions, a silent wall of steel and composites, watching as the remnants of the once proud Vanguard fleet drifted powerless or fled in disarray. A lone Cthar rescue vessel, arriving late to the disaster, managed to retrieve Forlag and the surviving bridge crew from the indomitable claw before its reactor finally failed. As they limped away from the nebula, Forlag watched through a viewport as human vessels systematically established defensive positions throughout Lyra 7, deploying new automated mining stations and formidable-looking defense platforms where Cathar strike teams had disabled their previous installations. There was no triumphant broadcast, no demands for reparations or formal surrender. Just the methodical, emotionless execution of what was clearly a pre-planned occupation strategy. It was as if, for the humans, the matter had been decisively settled the moment Admiral Thorne had uttered those 4 simple words, "We're done talking." The journey back to Cathar space was the longest of Forlag's distinguished career. He spent most of it in his private quarters, reviewing what intelligence they had managed to salvage regarding the human military operation. The more he learned, the more a cold dread settled in his core. The humans had not, as he initially suspected, suddenly diverted their 7th Expeditionary Fleet from Arcturus. Rather, they had been methodically positioning elements of this fleet in stealth mode throughout the sector for weeks, ever since the negotiations began. Each diplomatic session, each revised proposal, had bought them time to move another squadron into position, to deploy infiltration drones, to map Cathar communication networks. What Forlag had interpreted as desperate attempts to maintain a foothold in Lyra, 7 had actually been a sincere effort to avoid precisely the kind of devastating display of force they were fully prepared to execute. Ambassador Sharma hadn't been stalling because the Terran alliance was weak. She had been giving the Cathar every possible opportunity to choose a peaceful resolution while her military prepared for the worst-case scenario. The implications were staggering. If humans approached all potential conflicts this way, genuinely preferring diplomatic solutions while simultaneously preparing overwhelming military responses, then every interaction with them became a dangerous gamble. Their willingness to talk wasn't a sign of weakness to be exploited, but rather a courtesy extended to potential adversaries, a final chance to avoid annihilation. News of the disaster at Lyra, 7 spread quickly throughout the Cathar Confederacy. Initial disbelief gave way to shock, then to a profound reassessment of human capabilities and intentions. Military analysts began reviewing past human conflicts with fresh eyes, noting patterns they had previously dismissed as fortunate coincidences or reactions to weak opponents. The humans never began wars with grand declarations or ultimatums. They negotiated earnestly until the very last moment. And when diplomacy failed, they didn't escalate gradually or posture with limited strikes. They simply announced, with eerie calm, that talking was over, and then unleashed carefully planned, overwhelming force with coldly efficient precision. 3 weeks after the Lyra 7 incident, Forlag stood before the Confederacy Council, accepting full responsibility for the catastrophic defeat. His once illustrious career was over, his name now synonymous with the greatest military humiliation in recent Cathar history. Yet as he concluded his testimony, he felt compelled to offer one final insight, a warning to those who would shape Confederacy policy in the future. "We fundamentally misunderstood the humans," he told the assembled council members, his voice steady despite his disgrace. "We interpreted their diplomatic efforts as a sign of weakness, their patience as fear, their willingness to compromise as an acknowledgement of our superior position." He paused, meeting the eyes of several council members who had been most vocal in supporting his aggressive stance. In reality, they negotiate not because they fear conflict, but because they genuinely prefer to avoid it when possible. Their restraint comes not from weakness, but from a pragmatic assessment of the costs and benefits of warfare. And when they determine that words have failed, when they quietly inform you that they are done talking, it signifies not the beginning of a conflict, but its inevitable conclusion. In the months that followed, the Cathar Confederacy established a new, far more cautious policy toward the Terran Alliance. Diplomatic channels were reopened, with Cathar representatives instructed to approach human proposals with careful consideration rather than dismissive superiority. Military intelligence resources were redirected toward better understanding human capabilities and intentions, while defensive strategies were thoroughly revised. Among Cathar military and diplomatic circles, a new phrase entered the lexicon, a warning passed from experienced officers to their subordinates, a reminder of the lesson purchased at such great cost in the swirling gases of the Lyra 7 nebula. When humans grow silent, prepare for the storm. For the Cthar had learned what other species were still discovering across the galaxy. Humanity's most fearsome aspect was not their technology, nor their numbers, nor even their tactical brilliance. It was the calm, emotionless efficiency with which they executed decisions once diplomacy had reached its end. Not when they shouted or threatened, but when they simply, quietly, informed you that words had served their purpose and the time for talk was over. In the great void of space, in diplomatic halls and military command centers throughout the galaxy, the phrase, "we're done talking," would come to be recognized not as a threat or an ultimatum, but as a simple statement of fact, the eerily calm demarcation between the world of words and the world of action. A line that, once crossed, could not be uncrossed. And in the swirling purple-blue gases of the Lyra 7 nebula, now firmly under human control, automated mining stations continued their methodical extraction of resources beneath the watchful eyes of UEDF defense platforms, silent monuments to the lesson taught to the Cthar Confederacy, and through them, to all who might mistake human patience for weakness.